Hard to believe that come March, that will mark 2 years since the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus a global pandemic. Is 2022 the year that it ends?
There are growing concerns from health experts about a group of Omicron subvariants.
Yeah, these new strains are able to dodge our immune defenses, and they pose a new threat to both vaccinated and previously infected people.
Russia has launched a military assault on Ukraine, hitting targets across the country. U.S. President Joe Biden has condemned the attack as unjustified.
If he is considering using chemical or tactical nuclear weapons, don't.
Inflation ran 7.7% higher in October of 2022 compared with the year earlier.
China has ramped up military movements off the shores of the island. Taiwan has responded in kind with troops firing warning.
These visits are consistently angering the Chinese government.
Iran has handed down its first death penalty sentence to an anti-government protester.
Even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden.
Future historians might look back on 2022 as a turning point that marked the end of one era and the start of a new one. Major war came back to Europe along with the threat of nuclear strikes, and the US policy of strategic engagement with China ended. Yes, there was some good news in the past year. Most importantly, the COVID-19 pandemic got better in a lot of places. Overall though, 2022 had more bad news than good. So here are our top 10 most significant world events in 2022. Number 10. British politics rocked by trouble. When a Prime Minister's time in office is measured in scaramouches, that's never a good sign. But this is how things were in the United Kingdom in 2022. The country that once ruled the whole world had 3 Prime Ministers in just 2 months and lost the monarch who had been in power the longest. More than 50 of Boris Johnson's government members quit in July to protest an endless string of scandals that happened while he was in charge. He agreed to step down, and Liz Truss took his place. She was only in the office for 45 days or 4.1 scaramouches. This is the shortest time any British Prime Minister has been in office. The bigger problem, and the main reason why Britain is in such a mess, is that Brexit hasn't led to the economic boom that supporters said it would. Number 9. Pakistan facing 3 crises at once. Pakistan was in the middle of political, economic and weather crisis. In April, Prime Minister Imran Khan lost a vote of no confidence in Parliament. Khan didn't leave quietly. Instead, he led his supporters in a series of protest marches to get rid of his successor. As Khan's supporters marched, Pakistani officials worked hard to solve the country's debt crisis because it was getting dangerously low. In August, massive floods were caused by heavy monsoon rains and melting glaciers. This made Pakistan's political and economic problems even worse. Over 1 million homes were destroyed and 1/3 of the country flooded. Number 8. Humanitarian crisis deepen. Russia's invasion of Ukraine brought attention to the fact that Ukrainians were leaving their country to find safety elsewhere. Due to this coverage, humanitarian and refugee crises in other parts of the world got less attention. The war in Ukraine is not the only reason for the rise in refugees and people forced to move. Early in November, the Ethiopian government and Tigrayan leaders signed an agreement to end a civil war that had been going on for 2 years and had forced more than 5.1 million people to leave their homes. But international aid groups and private charities worried that the West's efforts to help Ukraine were taking money away from other places where there were humanitarian crises. Number 7. Latin America shifts to the left. How much can change in 5 years? In 2017, most politicians in Latin America were to the right of the center, but when Andrés Manuel López Obrador became president of Mexico in 2018, the winds changed. Center-left candidate Alberto Fernández claimed Argentina's presidency in 2019. In 2020, Bolivia's presidency was a socialist named Luis Arce. Last year, the president of Peru was a socialist named Pedro Castillo, and the president of Chile was a leftist named Gabriel Boric. All of these events showed that the world was moving to the left. Latin America has seen this kind of shift to the left before. Unquestionably, these leaders will have difficulty keeping their promises to fix the many economic, gender, and racial problems in their countries. They all have to deal with a slowdown in the growth of the world economy, rising interest rates, more inflation, and the ongoing effects of COVID. At the same time, political divisions have grown in the region as a whole. Number 6. Iranians' protests. Protests can also bring down regimes that came to power because of them. This fact must halt the leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. In September, morality police in Tehran arrested Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman visiting Iran's capital city because she didn't cover her head adequately. She died while being held by police. People from all over Iran marched to the slogan "Woman, Life, Freedom." The protests quickly spread to every part of the country. Iranian leaders said that the United States and Israel were behind the protests. Still, the natural causes were the government's political repression, corruption, and inadequate management of the economy. Number 5. COVID eases. Pandemics always end in the end. 3 years after COVID first appeared, the first global pandemic in a century seems to end. This was clear because many countries lifted the lockdowns under the precautions. China was the only country that went against this trend. It had a zero-tolerance policy for a long time after every other country had given up on it. Instead, it preferred to crack down hard whenever and wherever outbreaks happened. Beijing started to loosen its COVID rules in December, but it hadn't made its own highly effective vaccine, wouldn't let Western countries being in highly effective vaccines, and most of its people hadn't been exposed to COVID. So the number of COVID deaths in China will skyrocket in 2023. Number 4. Prices go up again. The good old days weren't always so good. Anyone who lived through those years knows what it was like to have their wages go down because of inflation. Since then, there has been low inflation worldwide for the past 40 years. On the demand side, the government's years of easy monetary policy to keep the economy from collapsing during the COVID pandemic put more money in consumers' pockets. On the supply side, COVID and then Russia's invasions of Ukraine messed up the global supply chains, making it hard to get a lot of different goods. The problem is that raising interest rates is the primary way to stop inflation. Doing that doesn't do much to fix issues in the supply chain, and it could start a recession. Number 3. Changes in the climate got worse. When scientists first warned of a possible climate disaster 40 years ago, it could happen in the future. The year 2012 showed that this dangerous future is now here. Extreme weather events that used to be rare are now prevalent. The Inflation Reduction Act was passed by the US Congress and signed into law by President Joe Biden in August. At the end of the COP27 meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, a loss and damage agreement was made. This agreement says rich countries will pay developing countries hurt by climate change, but there needed to be more significant steps forward in cutting emissions. Instead, in 2022, the amount of carbon dioxide in the air kept going up. Number 2. US-China tensions got worse. China and the United States are already in a significant power competition. The national security strategy of the Joe Biden administration, which came out in October 2022, made the point clear. The administration pointed to Beijing's militarization of the South China Sea, its support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, its attempts to intimidate Taiwan, and so on. Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping met at the G20 summit in the middle of November. They agreed to work to ease tensions between them and to work together on things like climate change and public health. Still, the relationship will likely be filled with mutual suspicion and anger for years to come. Number 1. Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia started a special military operation necessary to force Ukraine to demilitarize and denazify. To the surprise of the Kremlin and most military experts, Ukraine was able to stand up to the first attack and then started to push back Russian troops. 6 weeks later, Russian forces left the city of Kherson in the southeast. This led to rumors that Ukraine might try to take back Crimea, which Russia had taken in 2014. As 2022 ended, it didn't look like there would be an end to the fighting. Russia attacked Ukraine's most critical infrastructure, hoping that winter would do what the Russian military couldn't, break Ukraine's will. The rest of the world had difficulty adjusting to Russia's present aggression, which caused price shocks, supply disruptions, and food shortages. We say it every year, but what happened in 2022 was genuinely unheard of. Changes at the top of many fashion companies, mergers and acquisitions, record weather events caused by climate change, unimaginable political and economic turmoil, and the death of the Queen, who ruled for 7 decades, and even what was almost a world war between Russia and Ukraine. We are at the end of today's video. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.